r/Nosleep. Posted by u/likeeyedid. Check out author's subreddit r/likeeyedid. The death room is only open on Sundays. What do you think you're doing, young lady? You are not supposed to be here. The strange man said as he entered the planetarium. It was a big hall with an oval-shaped ceiling. It almost appeared like a cinema with a screen above our heads though instead of in front of them. Sorry, I gulped. I must have gone through the wrong door. More than one wrong door I assume. But this place looks so freaking familiar, I said, unable to keep my eyes from the interior. Despite being a big fan of space and the stars since I was little, I couldn't remember the last time I visited a planetarium. Only open on Sundays. That's what the sign outside said that I'd followed. How lucky, I thought. Everyone feels like they've been here before. Nobody has. He said those words with a smile on his face that looked neither friendly nor kind. It was a mixture of annoyance and regret. Or maybe that effect was due to his strange appearance that would rather fit inside a theater. He was dressed in a suit with black and white stripes and had dark circles painted around his deep green eyes. His face was the one of everyone and no one at the same time. Do you work here? I asked. As I said, you're not supposed to be here, young lady. You better leave. I nodded and proceeded to walk towards the closest door. Just before reaching it, however, I turned around to the man once more. I do remember now. I came here once with school when I was 11 or 12. We watched some special show with music and... No, you did not. As I said, you've never been here before, he said in a much more rude tone now. I rolled my eyes and proceeded to head for the door. I can't even quite say how I ended up here. I have a horrible sense of direction. It's just that when you catch a memory of a long time ago and it is blurry, you somehow do your best to make it clear. He had made it more than obvious that I shouldn't be here though, and I did feel a bit rude, so I headed for the exit. I reached for the door handle but it wouldn't open. I turned towards the man with a helpless look but he only sighed. Well, now you may as well take a seat. The show is about to start. We must sit when it does. I looked around the rows and rows of empty red velvet chairs with a raised eyebrow. The only other people I saw inside, sat on the opposite side of the hall, leaning deep into their chairs so I couldn't recognize their faces but I heard them whisper and giggle. Are you sure? I asked but he was already pointing towards a seat near the door. I sat down. For some reason, it felt wrong to decline, and maybe this was a test run for a new show in here. It seemed exciting. Though now I realize all those arguments were rather hollow. I wasn't supposed to be here but that didn't matter just yet. To my surprise, the man in stripes took a seat in the big chair next to mine. He put his weight on the back and was now leaning deep behind, his gaze directed at the empty ceiling which didn't show anything yet. He moved carefully, though. Like his bones would break if he breathed too hard or moved too fast. Almost like an old man, but he couldn't have been much older than me. I copied what he was doing and leaned back. I couldn't help but grin from the excitement. Listen, girl. Do not interact with anyone but me, alright? Who would I interact with? I'm not gonna shout over to those people all the way over there, I mocked him. The lights turned down shortly after. We sat in darkness, the only sound you could hear was my rapid heartbeat. As absurd as the situation was, I felt like I belonged here. I felt at home. Tucked in neatly in memory of my childhood. A part of me wished to see the show with the music and the dancing stars. But of course, I wouldn't. I wasn't really at a planetarium, after all, I walked into a sham. I suppose you wonder what was going on. I'm trying to describe it the way I felt when I was there. You see, logic didn't really make sense in the death room. My mind was lagging, I wasn't yet able to be skeptical. The worry would come, it only took some time. However, first, the ceiling lit up. It was a spotlight shining bright right on top of us. Like a sun that mesmerized your eyes instead of burning them. Everything underneath it was drained in darkness, including us. The sun started shrinking and turning into something resembling clouds. Clouds that were dripping. A few tiny wet drops were falling onto my skin. Rain, I thought at first. Maybe it was an interactive show. But when I touched my face and smelled the sharp scent of iron, I realized it was something else. It's bleeding. The ceiling is bleeding, I whispered. The man in stripes didn't speak but he turned to my side and his eyes told me to be quiet. That's when another voice began speaking. When you feel suffocated, you need to breathe. I took a deep breath. The kind that fills you up entirely and makes you feel alive, but just before reaching the point of satisfaction, it got stuck. It didn't go in all the way. Like when you're running and running until your feet become too fast for your breath to keep up. All I wanted was to breathe fully. Your lungs are screaming. Can you hear them? The voice continued. I felt panic rushing through my body. It was only a voice, it couldn't control my lungs, but it felt as if the sole fact of being conscious of the breathing stopped it. It's not directed at you. You can breathe, the man next to me spoke. And he was right. I opened my mouth wide open and the rush of air made me see stars for a second. But then it got better. It regulated itself. I almost felt at ease again until I heard the noises from the other side of the planetarium. It sounded like someone was choking. I tried to shift my weight to the front to get up and check on them, but my body felt stiff. Breathe. For now. As you did when you were born. I heard panting and whispering. Then silence again. The clouds were long gone. I hadn't even realized that the ceiling was all dark until it changed again. Now we saw something that resembled the Milky Way. Darkness with a circle of light in the middle. My eyes were glued to the beauty of the projection, but slowly it turned ugly. Uglier than anything I'd seen before. A face appeared in the middle of the circle, a face filled with pain and suffering. Its eye sockets were hollow, the mouth cut in slices. And then it started to scream. At least that's what I thought at first, before realizing that the scream of damnation was not coming from the room. It was coming from the people on the opposite side. Jen, honey, it's okay. It's just a show, I heard a man say. The other person, Jen I suppose, started chuckling nervously. It's so freaking realistic, Justin. Was it like that when we came the first time? She said. He answered something, but I couldn't hear what it was. When you have lived through each day, the last one must come. The voice spoke again. This time it did sound as if it was coming from the ceiling. The disgusting figure was still embedded inside the Milky Way, but now the stars began to move and its mouth opened wide. It almost appeared as if something was falling out of it. Wasn't your first date the most lovely experience? A man from the opposite side spoke. He didn't sound like the first one though. His voice was deep and creaky. You were cuddled up in the comfortable chairs enjoying the stars, a woman with an even creakier voice added. It was the most wonderful time, Jen replied. That's why we came back, right? To feel wonderful again, Justin agreed. Are there more people here? I thought I only saw two, I whispered towards the man in stripes. Were you here before? It feels right, doesn't it? Warm and comfortable and nice. This was another new voice. One that sounded far closer though. Like, right in front of me. And strangely enough, I felt like I somehow knew it. If only I could shift my weight, but I couldn't. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could say something I felt someone grab my hand. It was the striped guy. He was squeezing my hand so tight, it almost hurt. And then I remembered he told me not to interact. So I stayed quiet. The show continued. The figure on the ceiling had now broken almost entirely out of the fake Milky Way. And it looked hungry. My heart started racing. Suddenly I didn't feel comfortable and safe anymore. Suddenly I started doubting everything around me, including my own presence. This wasn't right. This is wrong, I cried out. The man in stripes squeezed my hand even tighter and I stayed silent, but the other couple didn't. The woman was now crying deeply until it was interrupted by the screams of the man. My body was shaking. That was the moment when I realized what the striped guy was talking about when I walked in here. I had never been to this planetarium before. I don't think I'd ever been to one at all, but the memory had felt so clear. The screaming and shouting had stopped. The couple was eerily quiet. Are you okay? I shouted to the other side, now that I was coming back to my senses. It felt like I was waking up from a trance. They didn't respond. The Milky Way disappeared and the clouds were back. Now they were shedding more blood than before. The blood that tainted my face and clothes. The only proof I later would have it being here at all. The show was over. The projection ended and slowly the normal light was coming back. I looked around to see all those people I heard, but there was no one. As I was finally able to move my body again, I fell to the front. I tried to look for the couple. Jen and Justin. They were still hanging back in their chairs. But now their bodies looked lifeless and stiff. Tears started rolling down my cheeks. I did have plans today. I was supposed to meet Vincent. It was dark when I left my home. It didn't feel like the middle of the night now. I was inside a hall with no windows, imagining sunshine outside. But it was dark and cold when I was out there. I had forgotten all about it for the time I was here. How did I walk in here? For the life of me, I could not remember. Why am I here? I asked. A mix-up, I suppose. Maybe you made the mistake of being too close when it opened its doors. You came in a moment too late. It's lucky, it really is. I've never seen anyone else simply enjoying the procedure without being swallowed by it. We're not in a planetarium, are we? I muttered. He shook his head. It's a trick. It lures you in with a feeling of strange familiarity. You see what's in your memory. A place that feels nostalgic, yet not tainted. Neutral. I didn't even ask him what it was. I had seen and felt its presence after all. It lured in that innocent couple. My hands were trembling with anger and fear. I wanted to jump up and run, but my legs didn't move. They weren't supposed to yet. They weren't innocent. Not all victims are. Their fate was chosen by someone, and once a week, the room lures them in to perform the act. It's quite practical, actually. And you help it? This time his calm surface looked broken for only a second. I was lured in as well, though, in another way. I once followed a light. Now I do what it asks me. However, this is the first time we had a visitor. A terrible mix-up of schedules, I suppose. Really lucky. We need to get help. Call someone. And send them where? To a planetarium you believe you visited as a child? As soon as you walk out the door, you won't be able to find it again. And you better hope it won't find you. What if it does? I whispered. Then your seat won't be here next to me but where they were. I nodded, my blurry vision targeted at the ground. You will go through that door and leave. Make sure nobody sees you. And next time you are at a place that feels strangely familiar, get the hell out before the doors close.